phone rang, once before the line went dead. Then came the sound of footsteps upstairs where no one should have been. It was Christmas Eve, and the house was eerily silent. Emily and her younger sister Claire had the place to themselves for the first time in years. Their parents were stuck out of town, and a snowstorm had ensured they wouldn't make it back until Christmas morning. At first, the sisters had been thrilled. A night to binge movies, eat junk food, and sleep in the living room under the glow of the Christmas tree. But by 8 p.m., the power had flickered twice, and the snow outside was piling higher against the windows. Emily felt uneasy, though she tried to brush it off. It was just a storm, she told herself. Claire, curled up on the couch with a blanket, teased her. "You're always so paranoid, Em. Relax. No one's breaking in during a blizzard." Emily forced a laugh, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, deliberate raps on the front door. The sisters froze. Emily glanced at the clock. It was almost 9 p.m. No one should be out in this weather. Claire laughed nervously. "Maybe it's carolers." Emily didn't answer. She slowly walked to the door, her heart pounding. Peering through the peephole, she saw nothing but swirling snow. She opened the door a crack. "Hello?" she called. There was no answer, but in the snow, just beyond the porch, she saw footprints leading up to the house, and none leading away. Emily shut the door quickly, locking it. She turned to Claire, who looked uneasy now too. "Probably just some kids messing around," Claire said, though her voice trembled. But Emily knew better. An hour later, they heard the noise again, this time from upstairs. The sisters were huddled together on the couch, the TV playing softly in the background. When the first thump echoed from above, they both froze. "That's the attic," Claire whispered. Emily shook her head. "No one's up there. It's probably the wind or something." But Claire wasn't convinced. "The attic door doesn't open unless someone pulls it down." Emily grabbed her phone and dialed their parents, but the call wouldn't go through. The storm had knocked out the service. Frustrated, she muttered, "Stay here," and went to investigate. The attic door was closed, just as she'd expected. But as she stood beneath it, staring at the pull cord, a sudden chill crept down her spine. She could have sworn she heard faint whispering coming from above. She backed away slowly, heart pounding. When she returned to the living room, Claire was gone. "Claire?" Emily called out, panic rising in her voice. She checked the kitchen, the bathroom, even the basement. Nothing. Her sister's blanket was still on the couch, her hot chocolate still steaming on the table. But Claire had vanished. Then, from the direction of the attic, Emily heard it. A muffled cry. She sprinted back upstairs and stood frozen beneath the attic door. "Claire?" Emily whispered. A sudden rush of cold air blasted down, and Emily staggered back. She grabbed her flashlight and climbed up, the beam cutting through the shadows. What she found made her blood run cold. Claire was sitting in the middle of the attic, her back to Emily. She was motionless, staring at the floor. "Claire?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Her sister turned slowly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and unblinking. In her lap was a crumpled piece of paper. "Who gave this to you?" Claire whispered, holding it out. Emily snatched the paper and read the words scrawled in red ink. "2 sisters alone and Christmas Eve. One will stay and one will leave." "What is this?" Emily demanded, but Claire just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "We have to get out of here." But the moment they tried to leave, the front door slammed shut and the locks clicked into place. On their own, the sisters screamed, yanking at the door, but it wouldn't budge. Emily turned to Claire, who was shaking violently. "There's something in this house," Claire whispered. "I saw it when I was in the attic. It was watching us." Emily didn't want to believe her, but then the lights flickered, and a shadow darted across the room. "Run!" Emily shouted, grabbing Claire's hand. They raced upstairs, locking themselves in the bedroom. But they weren't alone. The room grew colder by the second, their breath visible in the icy air. From the corner of the room came a faint scratching sound. Emily turned the flashlight toward the noise. At first she saw nothing, but then, slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and thin, with hollow eyes and a mouth that stretched into an unnatural grin. "Leave," it whispered. Emily grabbed a lamp and hurled it at the figure, but it vanished before the lamp hit the wall. "We have to get out of here," she told Claire. But the house wasn't going to let them go. Every exit was blocked. The windows wouldn't open, and the back door had disappeared entirely. The whispers grew louder, filling the house with an unbearable noise. Finally, Emily turned to Claire. "The attic. It's the only way out." They climbed the stairs again, this time together. The attic was darker than before, the air thick with an oppressive weight. As they stepped inside, the floorboards creaked beneath them, and then they saw it, a trapdoor leading to the roof. But as Emily climbed toward freedom, she realized Claire wasn't following her. "Claire, come on," Emily shouted, but her sister just stood there, staring at the shadows. "They won't let me leave." Claire whispered, "They've already chosen me." "No," but the shadows surged forward, pulling Claire into the darkness. The last thing Emily heard was her sister's scream before the trapdoor slammed shut behind her. When she woke up, it was Christmas morning. The house was empty, and Claire was gone. No one believed Emily's story. The police searched the house, but found no signs of Claire or the strange figure that had terrorized them. But every Christmas Eve, when the wind howled through the trees, Emily swore she could hear her sister's voice calling out from the attic, "One will stay and one will leave." Sarah had been away for years, escaping the small mountain town of Glenwood to chase her career and a new life. But after years of being alone, she'd come back, hoping for the warmth of family, the nostalgia of snowy nights by the fire. Christmas was supposed to be a time for memories, for reunion, but what she didn't know was that the town of Glenwood had memories of its own, dark, dangerous memories that no one talked about. As she drove up the winding road toward her childhood home, the snow began to fall heavier. The headlights illuminated the thick pine trees lining the road, their dark silhouettes looming like silent watchers. She felt it, an unshakable unease, as if something was wrong. But she told herself it was just the cold, the isolation of the mountain. It was just Christmas, but the town was too quiet. It should have been filled with light and laughter, but all she saw was a flicker from the distant streetlights, dim and failing. The silence was suffocating. The first sign something was wrong came when Sarah arrived at her family's home. The lights were off, the house was dark, too quiet for her liking. She hesitated, but pushed the door open. The scent of old wood and pine needles greeted her, familiar yet unsettling. The moment she stepped inside, the door creaked shut behind her, and a chill ran down her spine. Her parents had always kept the house warm, but tonight the air felt cold, almost unnatural. "Mom? Dad?" she called out, her voice echoing in the empty space. No answer. The house felt off, as though it had been waiting for her to return. She couldn't shake the feeling that something, was watching her. A creaking sound echoed from the stairs, but no one was there, just the shadows. Curiosity led her to the old family tree in the living room, half decorated with ornaments she and her sister had made as children. Her fingers brushed the cold glass of one ornament. She pulled it from the tree, a small snow globe that she remembered from her childhood. Inside, there was a blood-stained letter, folded and placed carefully within the glass. Heart pounding, she opened it. "Leave before midnight, or you will be the one to pay the price." Her blood turned to ice. She tried to shake the fear away, laughing nervously. It was just an old prank. But the air around her was suffocating, thick with dread. But then she heard it, a whisper, soft and melodic, as though carried on the wind. "Leave, Sarah. He's coming for you." Her breath caught in her throat. Sarah tried to call her parents again, but her phone screen was black. Her fingers shook as she dialed again, but it was useless. She was completely cut off from the world. The eerie whispers grew louder, and this time she recognized them. They were coming from upstairs, from the attic, from her childhood bedroom. Slowly, Sarah crept up the stairs, the creaking of the steps echoing in the hollow silence. The door to her room was ajar. Inside, she found nothing but dust and shadows. But then, in the corner, something caught her eye, a hidden door beneath the floorboards. An old relic from her childhood she'd never noticed before. What she found inside was far worse than anything she could have imagined. A shrine, covered in symbols with offerings placed around a long dead fire. And beneath it all, a wooden box, too old, too ancient to be anything but wrong. The moment she opened the box, a rush of cold air swept through the room. Inside, there was nothing but a small, tattered book, its pages filled with strange, incomprehensible writing. It was at that moment she realized what was happening. The town of Glenwood wasn't just quiet because it was a small town. It was quiet because everyone here knew the truth. Every 25 years, on Christmas Eve, the town offered a sacrifice, a human life, to keep the ancient evil at bay. And this year, it was Sarah. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. Her heart pounded as a cold skeletal figure draped in a torn Santa suit appeared in the doorway. Its eyes were hollow, empty voids, and its smile was stretched too wide, as if mocking her fear. The grotesque figure advanced toward her, its skeletal hands reaching for her. She turned and ran, hearing the haunting sound of bells ringing in the distance. She bolted through the snow-covered backyard, her feet slipping on the icy ground, heart pounding as she heard the Santa figure following. The snow crunched under its footsteps, too fast, too determined. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she pushed herself harder, the wind biting at her face, the bitter cold seeping into her bones. She had to make it. She had to get out of there. But then she realized she wasn't going anywhere. The snow-covered trees were closing in around her, and every direction she turned was a dead end. She tried to scream, but the wind swallowed her voice, and then she saw it, an old clock tower in the distance, its hands pointing to midnight. The Santa figure reached her then, and as it gripped her arm, it whispered in her ear. The darkness closed in, and everything went black. When Sarah awoke, the clock tower still loomed in the distance, but the snow was still falling, and the night was still young. It was Christmas Eve again. No matter how hard she ran, she couldn't escape. The same horrible chase through the snow, the same Santa figure stalking her, and the same ticking of the clock echoed in her mind. Christmas Eve was an endless loop, trapping her in the same nightmare. She was never meant to escape. The evil was part of the town now. It would always find a way to claim its sacrifice, year after year. And Sarah, she was the gift that would keep on giving. And in the end, there would be no escape, not for Sarah, and not for anyone else foolish enough to return to Glenwood on Christmas Eve.